Don't antagonize me. Oh, Alex.
Hey, clear the breathe again, the quality is going off. Okay?
What happened?
I don't know. This went away.
The IMP drop?
Yeah.
I'll put you on the bench. Stand by.
It's still better.
Yes. Yes, I'm right next to you. What do you need? It's calling. You got a second call.
Okay.
I don't think today will be that day, Alex. I don't think today will be the day.
Why'd you hang up? There were safety concerns in your home.
I have to.
Yeah, something like that. Something about safety in this home.
Yeah. If I care.
Probably very important.
Okay, I think he's got to stop now.
They need to talk to me.
Yeah, could you test New York? Could you test the IFB line with them in Antonio?
Right. They get Erdogan. It's a big deal. It's just like 6 months.
Yes. Tell them I do.
No. Pence, I think Pence
Thank you very much.
6 feet. Hey, ruling on this? Anybody? Erdogan looks just like Birch. Erdogan looks just fine. I think Erdogan's like crazy. Listed in the program.
And you know the college ADs always boost their height by about, he's really about 5'8".
That is beautiful.
See, this is what it's like when you're so high up. You
All people are short. Erdogan is in our club. He's very tall. And also,
So you can send sound to the headphone and the Bluetooth at the same time.
That's a good, I think it's like Pence's expression is the best. He's reaching,
angry
he's
tall.
like, he's stretching the neck.
they like white knuckling this sort of thing. Is that like?
Yeah.
Maybe it's just because he has such a big head. Yeah, how did they get that? I don't know. Holy crap.
Actually, she's over there.
We actually do have that. There's a measure around.
But you can get to like look at someone and be like, tell me,
Yeah,
tell
it's
me.
pretty cool. And I've never tried it in person. But you can measure other objects, like if you want to like the distance, you know, like.
There's more of a tradition of casual street violence.
Thank you.
I got this, I would.
No, it was like, just to say, like, in the top part, we were saying,
Good summer.
Shooting stuff on my iPhone lately.
Close enough, yeah.
but anyway, we'll work on what we're gonna work on, and then, and I'll start.
Is that,
We get a separate doc,
Zoom that out.
probably, but I don't know, search out and stuff.
Uses the cell
Yeah.
coverage, but also can tap into Wi-Fi.
Yeah, sounds good. Right. Well, yes.
Use an extra mode. Like you can, yeah, but you can use the phone and a Wi-Fi or Wi-Fi combined.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It takes like a minute to get fully unpick something. Phone I have, just have one phone that's 5K.
Good morning, everyone. Today is a very sad day for us as we all awaken to the sad news of the passing of our dear friend, revered and respected colleague, Congressman, Mr. Chairman Elijah Cummings of Maryland, my brother in Baltimore. He was in the Congress. Elijah was considered a North Star. He was a leader of towering character and integrity. He lived the American dream. In his own family, his parents were sharecroppers. He Phi Beta Kappa from Howard and a chairman of a very important committee in the Congress of the United States. He lived the American dream, and he wanted it for everyone else. He spoke with unsurpassed clarity and moral integrity when he spoke on the floor. I had the just coincidental opportunity to be at breakfast with someone who served with him in the state legislature in Maryland. And he said when Elijah Cummings would stand up in the state legislature, in the House of Delegates, as it's called there, the room would fall silent because everyone wanted to hear what Elijah has to say. And that is, of course, what was the case in Congress, in his committee, and in the country. He used to always say, our children are our living messengers to a future we will never see. So he wanted to be sure that that future was going to be better for them and that they would bring with them our values. In that regard, in terms of a better future, I'm so proud that this morning Richie Neal announced in the markup and the hearing that they were having on H.R. 3, lowering the cost of prescription drugs, that he was suggesting to name the bill for Elijah Cummings. So appropriate because Elijah was a fighter for lowering the cost of prescription drugs, reaching across the aisle to do so. He always strove to reach across the aisle and treat all of our colleagues with respect, and even had dialogue with the president for a while on this subject. So it would be very appropriate that H.R. 3 would now be the Elijah Cummings low drug cost now legislation, whatever the formal title will be. It's very sad for all of us. We've all lost a friend. I'm devastated by the loss. Conveyed our condolences of our caucus to Maya, his dear wife, this morning, and she said what we all knew. He just fought to the end. But that's the way he was, not only on his personal health, but what he believed in the Congress of the United States. So we're back now after our district work period. We're members all over the country. We're part of a drumbeat for H.R. 3. For our For the People agenda, our first, number one, was to lower the cost of prescription drugs. They presented H.R. 3, heard feedback, and we are benefiting it with two markups this week, one in energy and commerce, the other in education and labor. The hearing in Ways and Means this week, and then the markup next week. And then we'll be well on our way to reconciling different versions and bringing something to the I think it's really important to note that since the break, toward the end of the break, we did get this Congressional Budget Office's CBO score of $345 billion in savings just in the Medicare Part D part of the bill. Other savings, $158 billion in savings for family households, $46 billion in rebates and the rest. So the savings are considerable, and the Congress will decide how they will be. Some of it will be reinvested into innovation at the National Institutes of Health, perhaps in community health centers across the country, and expanded benefits for Medicare, visual, hearing, dental. Perhaps that's up to the committees. We'll hear back from them, and just trying to lower the cost to the community. Bobby Scott's committee is marking up this bill, but as many of you know, earlier in the week we announced his College Affordability Act, and we're very proud of the response from the members on that, and that will be making college less expensive. We're still at work on the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement and making progress every day on our path to yes, but we're not there yet. As soon as we can get the assurances from the administration and from everyone involved that there will be enforceability of some of the provisions of the legislation, that it will really be an improvement on the current NAFTA, then we'll be able to proceed. But I'm optimistic about that. I'm still hoping that, and this came up across, although we were focused on for the people agenda, lower health care costs, build bigger paychecks by building the infrastructure of America, cleaner government. That was our agenda in the campaign. One of our priorities in this session has been to reduce the risk of gun violence in our country. It's now been 232 days since we sent our bipartisan legislation to the Senate. Every day, about 100 people die from gun violence, nearly half of them children up to the age of teenagers. My colleague, Frederica Wilson, when I was in Florida during the break, gave me this bracelet made from a bullet and the orange color of gun violence prevention. So we're not going away until we get legislation passed to reduce gun violence in our country. As you know, this has been a week of some issues that relate to our foreign engagement. I was very proud of the work on the floor of Congress to associate ourselves with the democratic aspirations of the young people of Hong Kong. I've been working with now 3 generations of Hong Kong democratic leaders just for the Chinese regime to obey the basic law under which Hong Kong was to exist, one country, 2 systems, living under the basic law, which made certain guarantees that are not being lived up to. But Congress came through this week, spoke very clearly in a bipartisan way about our support for that. Now we are eager that we have bipartisan support in the Senate too, so hopefully that will come up soon there. As you know, yesterday on the floor, 354 members voted in a bipartisan way to oppose the president's dangerous decision in regard to Syria. By 2-1, Republicans voted to oppose the president's actions. There were only 60 votes in favor of the legislation. The legislation would have called for Turkey to use restraint, for us to help our friends, to be a trustworthy ally to Kurds, especially in humanitarian needs now that they're being bombed by the Turks, or being attacked by the Turks. It also calls for the president to show a clear plan for how Americans will be protected from ISIS, which has been further unleashed. Green light to the Turks, actions taken that are renege on our handshake with the Kurds, and now we need to have a plan to deal with what happens with ISIS. As you know, that was the subject of conversation yesterday at the White House. I also pointed out to the president I had concerns that the L road seemed to lead to Putin. The Russians have been trying to get a foothold in the Middle East for a very long time unsuccessfully, and now the president has given them an opportunity with the Kurds reaching out to them for support in Syria. The Russians were the beneficiaries of any withholding of assistance or encouragement to the Ukraine. Again, Putin benefits. The Russians benefited, Putin did. The president placed some doubt about our commitment to NATO right from the start of his administration. All roads lead to Putin. Then the president said, well, the reason I'm taking the troops out of Syria is because I promised in the campaign to bring the troops home. My question to him was, is Saudi Arabia home? Is Saudi Arabia home? Why are our troops going to Saudi Arabia if you promised to bring them home? He said, well, the Saudi Arabians are paying for it. Really? We're putting our troops in harm's way for Saudi Arabia because they're paying? It just didn't add up. But what it did do was cause a meltdown on the part of the president because he was unhappy with those questions. And it was unfortunate because we really we were invited to the meeting. The president started off the meeting by saying, I don't know who asked for this meeting, I didn't. And we're like, well, let's proceed anyway. And we had hoped that our real mission was to find out what the plan was. Leader Schumer was very forceful in that discussion with the president on what is the plan. My plan is to protect America, so that's a goal, that's not a plan. What is the plan for us to be protected from ISIS now that some of them have been unleashed in Syria because of the green light that the president gave the Turks and reneging on our trustworthiness as an ally with the Kurds who had been our friends. So for these and other reasons, that was most unfortunate. On a separate front of all of that, I'm very proud of the work of Chairman Adam Schiff. Again, this is so solemn. None of us came to Congress to impeach a president. That's not what we come here to do. And any such actions are to be taken very solemnly, seriously, in my view, prayerfully. It isn't a unifying thing for the country to have to go through this, but we do have to honor our oath of office to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States, our democracy, and our republic, as Benjamin Franklin said, a republic, if we can keep it. Well, it is our fight to keep it. As I've said to you before, the times have found us to do just that. So I'm very proud of the work that Adam Schiff is doing, and this isn't about politics or partisanship. It's about patriotism for our country, and I value the way he is conducting this with equal time on all sides for the questioning that are there. You've heard from him. We were here together when he presented how he was proceeding. He also sent a letter to members yesterday, which is in the public domain. I call it to your attention in case you have some questions about the professionalism and the fairness with which these hearings are being held. Any questions? Yes, Nancy.
Thank you. First of all, my condolences on.
Yeah, that's so sad.
He was a remarkable man. On the impeachment inquiry, how important is it to you not to let this bleed over into an election year?
Well, I think as I've really made, thanks Nancy for the question, and thank you for your condolences, Elijah. I keep saying to people, impeachment is about the truth and the Constitution of the United States. Any other issues that you have disapproving of the way the president has dealt with Syria, whatever the subject is, reluctance, the cowardice to do something about gun violence, the cruelty of not wanting to help our dreamers and transgendered people, the denial about climate crisis that we face. The list goes on. That's about the election. That has nothing to do with what is happening in terms of our oath of office to protect and defend the Constitution and the facts that might support. And we don't know where this path will take us, but could take us down a further path. But these two are completely separate.
But at what point would you just say, let's let the voters decide?
Who said that?
No, I'm saying, at what point might you say, let's just let the voters decide?
No, the voters are not going to decide whether we honor our oath of office. They already decided that in the last election. Yes, ma'am.
Republican leader Mitch McConnell seems to think that an impeachment trial in the Senate could wrap up before the end of the year.
I have no idea.
Does that seem unrealistic to you?
I have no idea. The path, the timeline will depend on the truth line, and that's what we're looking for. Yeah. Chad?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On the Syria policy, and this is sort of a two-part question. Number one, do you think that we've gotten into this question about what should be the right policy in Syria, because there has not been an AUMF since 2001 and 2002. And the second part, and this dovetails a little bit with what Nancy was asking, would there be a scenario where, because you said yesterday it was dangerous what the president had done in regard to Syria and Turkey, that this could bleed over into the impeachment issue
No.
because it's such a grave
No,
problem?
no. Let me answer your second question first. When I became Speaker the first time, no, maybe not, but there were those who were here who, okay, who knew that hundreds of thousands of people were in the street asking me to impeach President Bush because of the war in Iraq and because of the misrepresentation that was made at the time as to why we should be going into Iraq. That's a policy matter that isn't, in my view, an impeachment matter. And I said if they had any case to make, they could make it, but I was not going down that path. Again, what could be worse than the war in Iraq and the misrepresentations that were made to the American people? And as you know, says I was the senior Democrat on intelligence. I had the Adam Schiff job, the one he had before becoming chairman in the majority. But in the minority, I was a member of the Gang of Four. I saw all the intelligence. I knew that there was no intelligence to support the threat that the administration was putting forth, and I said at the time, the intelligence does not support the threat. Senator Graham of Florida was actually the chairman, because they had the majority at the time, the Democrats, the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, and he came to the same conclusion. We both voted no on the war. So I think that the war in Iraq was one of the worst mistakes in our country. I did not think it was about impeachment. It's about policy, and that's a different debate. Impeachment is about the law, not being above the law, abuse of power, obstruction of justice, about honoring our oath, honoring our oath of office. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. On the USMCA, you just said a short time ago, you're making progress every day.
Yeah,
Leader McConnell, however, has charged in recent days, as has the president, that Speaker Pelosi is still blocking the USMCA because Democrats' impeachment obsession is blocking urgent work for American families. So much of the work and negotiation here, Speaker Pelosi, kind of happening behind the scenes. Are there ways for Democrats to better convey the good faith progress to prevent the president and Republican leaders from charging that you are trying to block this?
Anybody else want to put all the Republican talking points on the table, because we could just get rid of them all at once?
Well,
Let me just respond to the second. Let me respond to your question rather than their misrepresentations, okay? First and foremost, it might be interesting to you, but a negotiation of this nature, and the administration would support this. Not only support it, it's what they want. These negotiations are not in the public domain. The exchange of proposals and this or that is, I can't even share them with the members. In fact, I have a hard time getting some of it myself from time to time, and I do. It has Pelosi written across it, so should it go astray, or I try to copy it to show anybody, that wouldn't happen. So these are confidential backs and forth, and I can honestly say that I think every day we are becoming closer. They were meeting yesterday with the trade representative, with some of our task force. I think they're going to meet again later today, perhaps at one more time. And then we should just see the issue is, do we have enforcement? So the people who are saying that don't know what they're talking about or have a different agenda that they want to present. But we feel very good about being on a path to yes. We're not there yet because we don't have the enforceability assurance that we need to have. While we have some good things in the bill, it's only a list of good things unless it can be enforced.
Sure, and as far as you know, things like labor and environmental standards continue to be the Democrats'
But the three things, the overarching is enforceability of the whole thing. And then the three concerns, as we have discussed before, are environment, the environmental concerns. And as a Californian, I can tell you firsthand that needs to be addressed, but all the border states could probably tell you that as well, vis-a-vis the southern border. But the agreement has to be respectful of global agreements that are there on the environment. In other words, this is about what is realistic that we can get done. In terms of the prescription drug, that's a very big issue in our caucus, and we hope that we can resolve that. And then the third are the workers' rights and the rest. We don't see a situation where diminishing the prospects for workers in Mexico is any good for our hemisphere. So we want that to be very fair in that regard. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and again, condolences on
Yeah,
Chairman
yeah.
Cummings. There was a picture yesterday that was taken at the White House with you standing up at the table speaking to the president. Can you tell us a little bit about that picture and what was being said at that time?
I think I was excusing myself from the room, but I think I told you what the thought that I conveyed to the president in the meeting about the 354 to 60 vote in the House disapproving of his Syria actions, A. B, my concerns about all roads leading to Putin. And if the president is saying, I said during the campaign I was going to take the troops home, then is home Saudi Arabia. That would be about the essence of either sitting down or standing up, what my conversation was with the president. But most important part of the meeting was, what is the plan? And that was part of my report on the legislation on the floor. What is the plan for fighting ISIS now that we have reneged on our handshake with the Kurds to do that fighting for us there? And that was strongly presented by Senator Schumer. So one or the other of those things is what was being said. I think it would be interesting, you tell me, if we could have a recording of what goes on in those offices, because they come out and say, oh, this happened and that happened. And you're like, we must have been at two different meetings because that didn't happen. But nonetheless, then you get these kind of questions and the rest that have no fidelity to fact, but it's true that that's what they said. It is true that that's what they said. So I don't know what at that moment I was probably saying all roads lead to Putin. Yes, ma'am. Last question.
Speaker, as you pointed out, Chairman Schiff sent out the letter yesterday.
Yes.
Describing the process that he's going through in his committee right now, saying there could be public testimony ahead.
That's right.
I'm curious, how will you determine and when in the future rules for this process, including whether the president will be allowed to have counsel or representation down the road as part of impeachment?
Well, you know what? This is a matter for the committee, and the rules are, we have rules of the House that govern all of this. But I think it's really important to reiterate the following. The process that the House is going through right now would be the equivalent of a special counsel in case of whatever the name was at the time for the Clinton or Jaworski and Sareka, way back when, before you were all born, on the Nixon. So they had prosecutors who were doing the investigation, and they were not doing that in the public domain. And so this is the part where we gather evidence. And as I've said to the president over and over, if you have some, I said this to him on the phone the day that we made our announcement about proceeding with the inquiry, that we've asked for your taxes. If you have nothing to hide, show us your taxes. We've asked for Mazer, your accounting. If you have nothing to hide, show us that. We've asked for this, that, and the other thing. If you have nothing to hide, we're giving you opportunity to show that you have nothing to hide. But what you're doing is just going further up into the courts. And last Friday, we had 5 court decisions in our favor, another one this week. So in terms of the law, this is about the Congress, the courts, and the Constitution. And in terms of the Congress, our responsibility is to fairly get the information according to the rules. And Mr. Schiff is running that show for us now. Thank you all very much. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you.
They said, haven't checked in yet.
I'm chained to this building for a while now.
Okay.